Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Following the lead of many other shows, East LA Cape is going to be digital this year. The East Los Angeles Comic Book Art and Pop Culture Expo, or CAPE for short, was founded in 2016 by a group of lifelong comic book and pop culture fans. They all grew up in East LA and are headed by Peter J. Malini, who owns Nostalgic Books and Comics in San Gabriel, California. The show is dedicated to creating community and bringing together artists and vendors from our surrounding neighborhoods so that we can all enjoy in the art that our community has to offer. This is the first episode of our virtual Artist Alley, where we will be bringing in that community to highlight all of the products and all of the art that they're creating during the pandemic and how you can find them so that you can purchase from them and that you can help support small businesses and independent artists. Joining us here today is Javier Hernandez. Javier is a DIY cartoonist and creator of such comics as El Muerto, Maniac, Priest, and Weapon Tex-Mex, which he publishes under his own imprint, Los Comics. He is also the associate producer of the award-winning movie El Muerto, a film adaptation based on his graphic novel. In 2011, he also co-founded the Latino Comics Expo, the nation's first convention dedicated to spotlighting Latino creators. He teaches comic book workshops throughout Los Angeles in schools and in libraries. Thank you so much for joining us today, Javier.
Yeah, thank you, Marisol, for having me, and East LA Cape for hosting this. Good to be here.
Pete?
Hold on. Oh, wait. What was my question? I'm sorry.
What was your question? Yeah.
The first question was, how did you get into art?
There you go. So Javier, how did you get into art?
Well, I'll blame my older brother, Albert. He used to do, I was probably about, I don't know, 7 or 8, and he used to draw like these little cartoon characters, like sport figures, football, and I think it was mostly football and baseball players. So he'd have like this, blank sketchbook that you buy at the supermarket, and he'd just draw on each page just a big, a guy tapping another guy or someone sliding into third base and stuff. So I wasn't into sports, but I was really amazed by those drawings. Like, wow, you're all proud. My brother drew that. But really just that you see that somebody drew it. Because, otherwise you're watching cartoons or whatever, and like, okay, you see the stuff on there, and you don't really think about that it's drawn. You're just like, oh, this Bugs Bunny's funny or something. But to see the actual artwork, I think that made a big impression on me. So that's really the first exposure I had to it's art, like real art I could hold and touch. And then, of course, like you talked about, just watching cartoons and like every other kid, especially in the 70s, I think it was like a golden age of like reruns, right? There was so much, television wasn't brand new, but, still kind of a young medium. So there was all these channels that they had to fill the hours and hours and hours of programming. So, what are they showing us? They're showing us new stuff like Incredible Hulk or the $6 Million Man or the Gong Show, real classic culture like that. That's what I grew up on. But tons of reruns. They're showing us the old Batman TV show, the different Batman cartoons, Speed Race, everything. So it was just a huge amount of stuff to consume. I mean, obviously there's way more now because now you have, nonstop streaming from the palm of your hand, from the phone and everything. But it was just taking all that stuff in as a kid. And then, of course, my brother also used to read comics. And then by this time he was in high school, and so he was kind of getting away from comic books, thankfully, because he had to give them to somebody. So probably like 2 shopping bags worth of vintage 1969, 1970, 71 comics. That's what he was buying. In fact, like this was one of the comics.
Oh, yeah.
Marvel Tales, whatever, number 16.
Mm-hmm.
So this isn't the original one. The original one's all tattered, but I bought another, collector junkies. We buy extra copies over the years. But, so I'm reading all these comics he gave me. And of course, this was like the early Steve Ditko Spider-Man reprints. So anyway, that's where all that art influence, art appreciation came from. Comics, cartoons. And like I said, my older brother was an actual artist, or at least drew. And then that really gave me the bug to start drawing myself.
Great. So tell us what you're offering to sell, or what services do you have that people can get a hold of during this pandemic?
It's like a real estate guy. What services? Well, I'll come to your home and what do I do? So I have social media accounts like everybody else. So I'm pretty much daily always putting stuff up there. I can give the addresses out after. But, you know, I have a Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. So just throughout the day, like everybody else, I don't have cats, so you don't get cat pictures from me, thankfully. But, you know, if I'm working on something, on some art, whatever, I'll take a picture, put it up. Or, you know, like I just did, like I'll just grab some random comic off my shelf and, I think I'll take a picture and, you know, share it. Because, you know, you just want to start a conversation. Because then you get people like, oh, wow, I remember that, or da-da-da. The nice thing is you don't get any haters. You don't really get people saying, oh, that comic sucks. Because they know better, because most likely the ones they read really suck. But yeah, it's just about sharing online for me. Like, you know, giving it out for free, I guess, because I know there's been talk with a good friend of mine he's always trying to tell me the virtues of going to Patreon. So we have a big back and forth about that. I mean, one of it is because I don't know if I should be saying this, but, you know, if I'm already putting all this stuff out for free, at least, you know, I don't put out the comics for free, but just sample, in process stuff. I feel odd, like, okay, now I'm going to switch it to Patreon. So it's a paywall. Like when they do that with the newspaper, we all get pissed off. So then, like, well, not everyone's going to pay for it. And I understand that because I have, you know, I don't know how many people on my Facebook, but most are just casual acquaintances. Okay, let's see what he's doing. They're not going to want to pay. And I understand that. So I don't know. It's a whole, what was that?
Sorry, all of your comics are available for free?
No, not the comics. Just like when I do a process, like where, you know, like the one image I'm doing or something. The comics I like to sell. There's plenty of trees, so I figured let's keep printing comics. But that's what I'm putting out every day as far as what people can see. And I did start a brand new YouTube channel called Los Comics TV. So that's like they're usually about 30, 40 minutes where I just spend the whole time either doing a drawing demonstration or, you know, like what I like to do, I have something called the reading pile. So I have like a whole stack of comics and books. And then so I have the camera overhead and it's just looking down at my table. So you never see me on the video actually. I figure the important thing is the subject matter. So like the view the person has is, you know, this would be the table and I'm literally flipping through the books. So they're like over my shoulder looking down. And I just talk about the books. Like I'll talk about my impressions of this or whatever it is I'm looking through, art books or different books, or I'm showing some of my old books, my actual work, and maybe telling people not so much what the story's about, but what's the story behind the story, stuff like that. So it's kind of like you're like over my shoulder as I'm looking through something of mine or a comic that I bought or something, or something I'm drawing. So that's the newest thing I have that's, you know, out there. So people can do a search. I guess you just go to YouTube and search Los Comics TV, and they can start watching, I don't know, about 20 episodes probably by now. So
very productive.
Yeah, it's really fun too. I've been following it since you started. I actually won the first.
Oh, that's right. That's right. I had a contest and Pete won it.
So where can people find your stuff? Like where can if people want to buy your comic books, where should they go?
So I have a thing called, there's this site called Store Envy. And a lot of people use Etsy, and there's probably other ones, I'm sure, Big Cartel. I use one called Store Envy. So it's spelled STORENVY. So the word store and envy, they share that E. So it's just one E in between Store Envy / Los Comics, I believe. So they can go there and look at my store, and, you know, I'm still shipping. You know, from what I understand, right, by the time the paper gets to your house, the virus should be like non-existent. But what I tell people, what I do when I get the mail, here's a little COVID-19 tip. You know, the mail comes over. I just leave it in the garage for a day, and then the next day I just go open it and then, you know, enjoy whatever it is, unless it's a bill. Yeah. But people can go find me. I guess go to my blog, the one I just mentioned, havzilla.com, because on there, on the right-hand side, you'll see all the links to Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and all that. So it's like the one place to go for everything, I guess.
And it's HAVZILLA.com.
It's JAV.
JAV.
It's like Javier, JAVZILLA.com.
You literally told me 5 minutes ago, and I still got it wrong.
5 minutes is like 90 days in internet time, right? It just goes so quick.
That's true. That's true.
So tell me about El Muerto. How did El Muerto come about?
I had wanted to do comics for years, throughout my 20s, but at the same time, it was like, this is back in the 80s. So there wasn't, I mean, there was comics already being made. People were making, self-publishing comics, but there wasn't like a comic book school, at least out here on the West Coast and such. And then really, I wasn't too keen, like, to jump in and work at Marvel or DC. I grew up loving that stuff, but then at the same time, as you're older, you start reading about the industry. And there was just so many things about it I thought was like, you know, poor treatment of artists and things like that. And also I was getting burned out on a lot of that mainstream stuff at the time. This is the time where, you know, right before they gave Daredevil a suit of armor, and I think Cap had a suit of armor, and
yeah,
Iron Man went from the yellow and gold armor to this big bulky white and red armor, and all these other, I guess, aesthetic choices. And maybe they sound goofy to people. I mean, but you know, like for me, like when something changes so much from what you grow up and visually, right? Sometimes you're like, well, I don't like that. And then the storylines and all. So I just got tired of reading the comics. So, you know, that was another reason. Like, well, if I don't care for these companies now at the time, why do I want to work for them? Even though there's other companies around it, you know, obviously since 70s, I guess, and 80s, independent companies. But so I didn't really pursue comics. And then now we're into the 90s. And I'm working at a screen print company, you know, a place that prints things, signs, decals, whatever. It was mostly industrial stuff. It wasn't anything fancy. It wasn't anything sexy, anything cool. But it was a job. So I had a real job, full-time, benefits. And then I got promoted to art director. So again, you know, it's that whole thing. Okay, now, you know, I got a career now. It's a steady job, and that's important. But there's that inside of you, like, you know what? I want to tell my own comic book stories still. So by the mid-90s, I just started, you know, looking around at independent comic books and just seeing all the different work that people were doing. You know, by that time, the Ninja Turtles story was, you know, already into the movie section, you know, the movie phase. They had already, you know, all that groundbreaking work. They did self-publishing their work. So independent self-published comics was a total viable thing to pursue. May not be the financial thing to pursue, but it's a very viable, doable thing for people. So I figured out, okay, I'm gonna make my own comic, my own story, my own character. And then at the time, it's like, well, what am I gonna do though? And it's like, well, I definitely want to do something that to kind of, you know, fill a hole in the industry. There's not enough Latino characters. We had the Love and Rockets by the Hernandez brothers. The White Tiger over at Marvel, and I had started learning about these independent creators, like Carlos Saldana from LA, does a book called Burrito, little like an anthropomorphic donkey, and this other guy in Texas, Richard Dominguez, was doing this comic book called El Gato Negro, which is I think last year was announced as a
is it a TV show?
TV show from Apple, right? Apple TV. I think it's Apple TV. I think that's right. Or MGM. I don't remember the press release, but anyway, but it's that guy, you know, but I knew him back then, you know, I discovered him, it was just a comic. So that kind of inspired me on the second level of, okay, you know what? So yeah, I could do comics like all these other people are doing, but I could do a comic book based on, in my case, a Mexican cultural identity. So that's how I came up with this. Somehow I came up with the idea of like, well, let me, you know, this is back in the mid-90s, all right? No one's doing anything with Day of the Dead, Dia de los Muertos. I mean, it's in the festivals all over Southern California, whatever, West Coast, Southwest. that was already established, and that comes from Mexico, the whole history of that. But in pop culture, you know, I would ask anyone, let's go back in the mid-90s and find out, was there Dia de los Muertos stuff in Target, Walmart? Was there Dia de los Muertos California lottery scratchers?
Yeah.
Did we have great movies like Book of Life and Coco? Excellent movies. No, we didn't.
Yeah.
Did we have a Day of the Dead superhero in comics? That one, without me even researching, I got to say no. But anyone's free to look it up. Please let me know.
Yeah.
In American comics. So I figured, okay, I want to do Day of the Dead theme, and I want to do Aztec mythology. Which again, you didn't see much Aztec mythology, and you know, it would show up once in a while in the comic. I've seen a few comics, like I don't know, Wonder Woman or Superman is fighting an Aztec god, or it may show up in a Thor comic once in a while. But again, I thought it was time to try to, you know, not make it as popular as like Greek mythology, but like, you know, why can't a hero have Aztec mythology in his background the way, you know, you see Hercules, you know, every year with the new movie or cartoon series or something. So long story short, it's what I wanted to do. Like I wanted to specifically do this Mexican cultural character. So somehow I took those elements and, you know, came up with this idea of this young guy on his 21st birthday. His name is Diego de la Muerte. So that tells you already bad news, right? A guy's born with that name. He's bound to get into some weird trouble. On his 21st birthday, on Day of the Dead, he gets killed in a car accident on his way to a Day of the Dead festival. Hence, that's why he was wearing the actual costume at the time. And he wakes up in the land of the dead, the Aztec land of the dead, Mictlan, and then he's confronted by these two Aztec gods, Tezcatlipoca, Mictlantecutli. Yes, it took me forever to learn how to pronounce those names. It's the god of destiny and the god of death. And anyway, they turned him into this El Muerto, sent him back to Earth a year later. Ideally, it was to do the bidding of the god of death, but there's like a switcheroo between the two gods. So the god of destiny sends him back, but he has the power to actually resurrect, which is, last time that happened was a guy called Jesus Christ 2,000 years ago. So anyway, so a lot of influences went into the creation of the comic, right? Everything you bring into it from your, whatever, your pop cultural background, your religious background, your cultural background, and just, you know, weird, bizarre things you like. So that's basically, you know, in a big nutshell, how I came up with El Muerto. A one-person job.
There you go. So I have a question. I was wondering, I recently I watched the movie again. I hadn't seen it in a long time, and I read your most current graphic novel, and I noticed like a lot of the similarities and whatnot. So I was wondering, was that always part of the story that you came up with back then, like what the stuff they did in the movie, or how much did the movie influence like your current retelling of the origin?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the movie. Yeah, I don't know if I mentioned that in the whole. There was a movie made of the comic in 2007. Mm-hmm. We filmed it 2005, but came out 2007. So yes, there was a film based on El Muerto, starring Wilmer Valderrama. It was an independent film. I was associate producer on the movie, and yeah, it's been out for quite some time now. As Pete mentioned, here's the DVD of it. So Pete, yeah, so they filmed it in 2005, and they had contacted me by 2001 initially, like the director, because I did an interview on NPR from the floor of San Diego Comic-Con. So at the time, you know, the director asked me, Brian Cox, hey, can you come down? You know, I'd like to meet you. Just talk about, you know. So obviously, you know, it's from a director, like, oh, okay, they want to talk movie. So I go to his office on Sunset, across the street from the old Tower Records. That's long gone, right? On Sunset. You know, every time I tell my histories, my stories, half the time I have to like put a little caveat. Oh, by the way, Meltdown Comics is no longer there, or this is no longer there, or you know, it's like the time marches on, and then you know all these technology changes, right? Anyway, enough of that. So at the time, as I sat down for a meeting with Brian, the director, in 2001, I only had a the first book done from 98 was when I started, very slow. And I really just had the one book, and I had this side book called Manga Muerto, but it's a different spin on the character. So basically, when Brian's asking me questions about the storyline, the gods, and this and that, sometimes I would just be honest and tell him, well, you know what? I haven't really got there yet. I'm not sure where, So he's like, okay. But he still wanted to make the movie. So basically what happened, I got a lawyer and, of course, a contract, and the producer got, Larry Ratner got involved. Brian brought him in for a producer. So I'm negotiating with and the contract is signed and everything. And, at the time, Brian, basically the director, he wrote the screenplay. So he basically had to write the story based on just what was in that first issue. So I don't think I have one lying around, but so it was just a basic, the origin part of it. Like, it wasn't even so much a mission that happened to him at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So Brian made up, the whole part about, like, Diego gets, he gets the thing carved in his hand. He gets marked for a prophecy, and then when he's 21, the gods basically call him in. So it's a little different than the comic story, which I was fine with, because one thing going in, just as a comic fan, it's like, okay, we got the Batman from the comic, which is different. Pick your Batman, whether it's the Golden Age Batman, the Neil Adams Batman, the Marshall Rogers Batman, Frank Miller Batman. You got all those, and you got like Batman, Adam West Batman, which is very different than this stuff.
Yeah.
And then you got these different cartoon Batmans, and then you got whatever other Batman. So that teaches me, like, yeah, it's okay to have a whole buffet of Batmans, or in my case, it's okay that there's two different versions of El Muerto going kind of different, ways. I kind of welcome that in a way, because at the end of the day, it's like, well, the core real El Muerto, or whatever, the true one, is the one that the author creates.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but you can have it both ways. It's like, oh, well, I got a movie out of my character. And there's the movie Muerto. That's fine. I enjoyed tremendously the process of making that film. So Brian came up with a lot of the story as you see in the film.
Mm-hmm.
But my intention for me was always to do what you just read in the graphic novel, where he comes back to Earth, Diego, and he goes to Baja, Mexico, and he gets caught up in this circus freak show. They put him in a circus freak show because they find out he has this weird ability. You shoot him, he comes back up, or the dog gets killed, he brings it back to life. So, so that's the thing I always had in mind. Maybe if there's a new Netflix, YouTube, give me a call. A reboot, whatever. I just say a new version of, so maybe they'd be more apt. Like, okay, now we have a whole graphic novel we can look at.
Yeah.
So maybe you'll see the whole circus and Catalina and all that stuff in a movie. But yeah, but Brian just on his own kind of, made up a story, and then he would just show me the draft of the script each time, and I would just give my opinion on it. But I wasn't there to, and you don't have the power anyway, but I'm not there to be like, oh no, I don't like this. He always told me, I had a great relationship with him. That's why I love the experience. He goes, whenever you have an issue with anything I come up with in the story or whatever, let me know what it is. Don't say you don't like it, or don't just say you don't like it. Say, oh, I think this would be because of this, which makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Saying I don't like it, that's not helpful. Like, of course, no wonder they don't listen to us creators and writers and authors. I mean, Stephen King complains about movies that he gets made, and that's Stephen King.
Yeah.
So, some schmuck from San Gabriel Valley is going to have any power over the filmmakers. That just doesn't really, for the most part, does not really happen. But I was happy with the end result.
Awesome. Tell me a little bit more about the Latino Comic Expo. How did that come about?
Like a lot of things, it comes about because, like, there's a void and hasn't been done yet at the time, and you kind of have all these resources at your hand. So my friend Ricardo Padilla, who was a fan of mine from the early days, that he used to bring his kids, hold them by the hand, he'd bring them into the convention up in San Francisco Alternative Press Expo. And I guess his kids would always tell him, like, Daddy, how come there's no superhero comic characters that kind of look like us or have our background, Latino kids. So when he saw my work, and also some other friends of mine, Rafael Navarro and Rodi Montijo, like Ricardo was like, oh my gosh, as a comic fan and as like a proud Latino, and a parent, I'm glad I can get these books for me and my kids. So we became friends. I became friends with the family and everything. And one day we were just, I was up on up in San Francisco for a show, or whatever. And me and him were literally walking the streets of San Francisco, like the old TV show. And we were just talking about certain things. I'll just cut to the chase, but he wanted like to just, have like Latino presence in comics. And I was like, well, I go, then why don't we do, and I made up the word on the spot. They literally came out of my mouth one at a time. Like, why don't we make up a Latino Comics Expo? He's all, well, what's that? I go, well, I guess it'd be a convention, but just spotlighting Latino creators of all types, cultural backgrounds, men, women, everything, LGBTQ. I mean, and from any country, Latin American country, any genre, superheroes, horror, autobio, historical, political. And the reason I thought of that, because like I already knew at that point in 2010 when we were thinking about it, I had almost 9 years of just meeting other creators. So I already had like a Rolodex in my head, right, of all these other Latino creators. So that's what I'm saying. Like I had these resources available already. So it's like, okay, well, if I know I can get a hold of these people and invite them, we won't have a problem filling up the first, convention hall, whatever. So he goes, yeah, let's do it. So we're up in San Francisco, and then I think he mentioned like, hey, let's try. Let's try the Cartoon Art Museum. That's like really huge, well-renowned comic book museum on the West Coast. And I'm thinking like, wow, go to the top. Wow, I don't know if they'll take us. I go. So we figured, well, why don't we try like I told Ricardo, let's do it up in San Francisco. But try the American Legion halls. Try some cheap hall, some real dive, so we could, at least afford it. And then if they don't do it, we'll go to the Cartoon Art Museum. Anyway, I go back home. Weeks later, he calls me up. Hey, Javi, they said yeah. I go, who said yeah? Like I already forgot. He's on Cartoon Art Museum. Cartoon Art Museum said yeah, they'll host us. The host is for this expo. Like, oh my gosh. So thank you, Cartoon Art Museum. We love you guys. Yeah, they hosted us at in the famous walls of their museum. So it was one weekend in May, I think, 2011. We had like 12 tables. It's not a huge museum, so there was a couple of rooms. So 6 years, real humble, small beginnings.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was great. It was really great. And then like 2 days, and then at the end of the day, me and Rick are like, damn, we did a Latino Comics Expo. We had a couple of panels, just a few, and it was great. So that's where it started. And then Cartoon Art Museum invited us back for at least 2 more times. Then we got invited other places. Hey, San Jose State. Hey, we'd love to have you guys. So then we went there 1 year, and then eventually we had to tell the museum as friends, hey guys, you know what? We're kind of outgrown it because, there was only so much room in your space. And then, we've had like 20 tables at the other show, so we're probably gonna have 30 next time. So, we parted off on very good terms, and then we moved on to Long Beach Museum of Latin American Art, MOLA. And we've also been to Texas, Brownsville, Texas Museum had us once. Last year, man, everything's all mixed up with the quarantine. I don't know how long I've been locked up. But recently we were in Modesto, California, probably last year, yeah. And so, actually, yeah, haven't made any announcements yet, but we will soon. That's all I could say. Mm-hmm. So, but yeah, that's the genesis, and I guess I gave Marisol the whole history.
Thank you so much, Javier. It's been a pleasure having you. Thank you so much for joining us. And for everyone else, if you want to find Javier, his blog is havzilla.com, HAVZILLA.com. You can find him on Facebook at facebook.com/Javier.f.Hernandez and Instagram, Javier Los Comics. So everybody run out there, add him as a friend, and buy his comic books. And that concludes our first episode of our virtual Artist Alley. And we will see you guys soon.
Thank you.
Thanks.